Well, hey, I want to thank everybody for coming and listening to the Worthy podcast. One of the great things that we have in store for you today is a interview with two executives, and we're going to be talking a little bit about how they took action relative to racial injustice. This is part of our bigger series, our bigger guest series, where we bring in guests that are CEOs and executives. And the biggest thing that we talk about is their ability to take action within personally, but also within their organizations, and how they are actually going about educating their peers, educating their organization on racial injustice and some of the things that they can actually do to take action. So we have two outstanding people today. I have actually spent a lot of time with them over the last probably month and a half. One of them probably a little longer than that. We've been knowing each other for a while, but I'm just excited to have both of them here to talk a little bit about the workshop that I was able to do for their organization, but more importantly, what they took away personally, and then what the organization took away as well. So I do want to introduce Jeanette Cross, and then we're going to have Linker Mills, but I'm going to have Jeanette go first. And ladies first, Linker. I apologize.
Always.
So I'm going to have Jeanette go first and tell us a little bit about herself, what she does, and then we'll of course bring Linker on.
Sure. So I'm managing director with Berkeley Research Group, which is a healthcare consulting firm that really we have work with a lot of hospitals in Maryland. So, we live, we work here, we interact with them, and we specialize a lot in population health, payment reform, strategy work with Maryland hospitals. I do some work with Linker's hospital, who's part of MedStar Health. So very near to that, as well as I also serve as, I'm going to say, the 7th female president of the Health Financial Management Association, which has been around our Maryland chapter probably for over 50 years, probably even more than that, Linker. So just kind of put a little diversity out there that I do get to be lucky number 7. And so when everything started happening with COVID, just to give a little kind of context, when everything started happening with COVID, in regards to really seeing disparities in terms of who was getting more ill from that and higher mortality rates, as well as what we saw with George Floyd, Linker and I talked, and we determined this was a time that, look, we're seeing health disparities in care delivery and how people with comorbidities and how COVID is impacting them differently, and what are the underlying causes, as well as, the racism that I think came out with the systemic racism that came out with George Floyd, is that both from a professional in terms of delivering healthcare, as well as from a professional development and how you interact with your peers, thought it made sense to bring diversity a little bit more into our professional organization, and as well as take that back to our own organizations.
Excellent. Well, this next gentleman, he happens to have probably one of the best names that I've ever heard of, and I think I've told him that several times. I am recently found out that I am going to be. I already know it's going to be a grandfather, but I am going to have a grandson, and I tried to convince my daughter to name our grandson Linker, and she said no. So I apologize, Linker. You are still going to be the only one. So I just wanted to introduce Linker Mills to everyone. Go ahead, Linker. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you so much, Steve. I'm currently the Director of Finance at MedStar Franklin Square and MedStar Harbor Hospital. I've been basically kind of doing this somewhat same job now for close to 25 years, the late 90s, started out at St. Joe's. It's kind of one of those things you live and breathe, and either you enjoy it or don't. It's a different world. You feel a little bit more part of healthcare when literally ICU is on the same floor as you in the hospital. And that's actually where I have the privilege of being this morning. I'm actually in my office at MedStar Franklin Square. I think Jeanette covered everything very well. We as an organization, we had looked at diversity several years ago. We actually had a board committee working on it, 2 very involved young individuals, and they ended up getting opportunities outside the region. And so we didn't want that to just lie. But as Jeanette said, with everything going on and the disparities I see every day and some of the things we try to work on in healthcare, it just came to the forefront that this is something we needed to address, and we needed to try to reach out to our members and help our members understand the situation better as a group.
Yeah, excellent. One of the things that I often talk about is, especially over the last 7 to 8 months, is around organizations, making statements. Right? We've seen so much racial injustice, of course, over the last 6 months, but of course, as we know, it's been happening for centuries. But the thing that has I think been a really good aspect of it are the organizations that are coming out and making statements and saying that they're against racial injustice. But the one thing that really I have to applaud you guys for, and several other organizations, is the fact that you guys took action. Right? I think there's one thing, in making a statement because maybe your competitors are doing it or somebody else is doing it, and your board says, hey, this is something that we need to do. But I think where the rubber meets the road is the fact that you took action. And I was so pleased when both of you reached out and talked to me about actually going through with this workshop. What were some of the things that you were hoping to have happened probably at the very beginning, when we started talking, and then maybe some of the things that probably transpired that you kind of learned a little bit about yourself as we kind of went through the workshop a little bit? Whoever, Linker, you want to go first on that one?
Sure. I know we have a very diverse group within Maryland HFMA. Not everyone is necessarily hands-on. As Jeanette said, she's got heavy hospital experience. She actually worked with me at MedStar Health years and years ago, so she realizes more. But we have some other folks that are more interested in healthcare but don't have the hands-on, and we wanted to make sure they were aware of what's going on as well. I mean, I saw all the reports. I read Modern Healthcare. I mean, I see it. We kept track of the COVID cases, and we actually track all the patients coming through here. Luckily, I actually just looked at it this morning, and it looks like our what we commonly call expirations for discharges are down from what we saw in April. And I was just glancing through it. Sadly, tragically, we're seeing still 1 or 2 a week. But we are still seeing, several dozen sometimes patients here at Franklin Square, and thankfully a little bit less at Harbor now. But maybe we're getting a hold on, but that doesn't mean people aren't left with long stemming problems that they're going to have to deal with for a long time. So it's a continuing issue, and we have to make sure that everyone has access to that type of health care. That's one thing I've been proud of in Maryland for years and years. Long before the Affordable Care Act, we had where we had to go out into the community. Now it's called a community health needs assessment. That's the formal name of it. We in Maryland we've had to do that for about 15 plus years now. We had what's called a community benefit report. I'm going to say probably back as early as 2003, sometime in the early 2000s, that we had to prepare and send off to the state. Basically say, what are you doing for your community? What type of charity care are you providing? What type of programs are you doing? What are you doing as a service for your community? And that's one thing where I'm very proud to be part of MedStar Health and part of the healthcare field. You feel like you're doing a little bit more, and you're reaching out to people and trying to heal them.
Excellent. Hey, Jeanette.
Okay, and to add to that, I do think part of it was really bringing the forefront of diversity inclusion a little bit into the workplace, just because and how we interact with people and what our responsibility is in terms of, as leaders within the organization, we can set the tone. It was interesting. I actually watched the movie 42 about Jackie Robinson this past weekend. My husband and daughter had been talking about it, and I said I had a little time, and I watched it. And what I thought was that president of that organization made a conscious decision to bring somebody up, and not only that, he mentored him of, this is how you need to behave. And to me, what that says is, we have to, as leaders, we are the people that are in the leadership position are the ones that can really facilitate the change. It's hard for someone that's in a position, either, their education level or the opportunities they had in terms of, internships, a lot of times that's who and those types of things, is that we have an obligation to really create the opportunity. The person still needs to do the work and work hard, but are we creating the environment that we need to help people be successful? And that can, and so that was really a bit of my goal, is to bring awareness that we're all not the same, and everyone has different opportunities in their life in terms of, where they're going to be. And you really have to understand some of those challenges and what drives, I can even think of it in terms of the health disparities. What drives those health disparities?
Correct.
If you go into West Baltimore, it's a desert in terms of grocery stores. You can't get fresh fruits and vegetables. So it's not as easy of saying, well, they should just eat better. What's available to them? What's their life like? I actually had one client that with the COVID, you had all this COVID drive-up testing, and she was at a hospital in West Baltimore, and she said, we created testing for people to walk up because those people don't have cars. So it's taking that step back of saying, I got to get outside my bubble of what I see and understand a little bit of what other people are dealing with, and how can we kind of even the playing field a little bit. And it was interesting. My daughter's school just said something out, and I thought this really struck me, and so I jotted it down, is we really need to strive to be a community of compassionate people. And that just really sat with me in terms of, we are so easy to make excuses about why there's health disparities in certain areas, but we have to serve as a community and as leaders to create an environment that will allow people to be successful and help overcome obstacles. I just thought that was really telling when I read that yesterday.
No, I thought, thank you for both for sharing, because I mean, as you guys saw, I was just jotting down so many different notes from what you said. I love how Lincoln talked about the community aspect, right? And in the context of, well, we've been doing this for a while, which is outstanding. And I thank you for shining the light on that, Lincoln, because I think that's the other side, is that a lot of people don't understand, and they don't realize that there are organizations such as yours that are doing really great things within the community already, and that they need to be highlighted. But then the other side is that, Jeanette said that we need to bring this internal. We need to make sure that everybody has an understanding, or a better understanding a little bit, because one of the first things that we talked about was, how do we educate the leaders? And we had, I think, 75 people on there, which was awesome. And we were able to educate and kind of bring it home and make it a little bit more personal, because I think that's how we started out. We started out the conversation with, as organization is nothing but made up of individuals. And so how do you as an individual consume and embrace the external side of what you guys are doing in the community, but also the internal side of what you need to address too, from a diversity and inclusion standpoint as well. So thank you both for that. Speaking about just from a personal standpoint, one of the things that we did talk a little bit about was around the idea of racism and what that meant, or how that felt. And I know, Jeanette, you were able to share a little bit, about kind of like your aha moment, as we were kind of going through this process, or not just us going through this process, but over the last several months. And could you kind of elaborate a little bit on that, if you don't mind?
Sure. So you had a chart, Steve, that went through kind of, this fear thing of, I'm not racist, and I personally don't treat anybody different, and I think back to growing up, and I grew up in Howard County, mom and dad, house, brother, sister. I went to school, I probably could count on my hand, how many Black people I went to school with. Not that, we all got along, but, I remember seeing them at my high school reunion, and they're like, it was really strange. You felt a little bit fish out of water. And also was hearing some stories later on. And I'm like, I never would have said that. I never even knew that happened. But I was in kind of that bubble of like, everyone was kind of like me. They lived I just assumed they lived in a house. They had, two parents, they went to college, the parents paid for college. And so I had a lot of those, which I'm very grateful for. And I'm probably even more grateful now than I was then, of the opportunities that played for me in terms of, I was able to go to college, graduate, not have any debt. And it really took to when I was starting to out there working and talking to people going, you have college loans? Really? Like, I just was so much in my little bit of a tunnel vision, and I would never treat anybody different, but I didn't really have a good awareness that, you know, other people didn't quite have those advantages and how that helped me. It wasn't just hard work. It's always, you know, I had kind of the step up in order to have that progression into my career. And so I kind of moved to that middle level of a little bit more awareness. And then I think based on our discussions and everything that's been happening is realizing that's not enough to be kind of aware of that. As a leader, I need to actually be proactive and do things in terms of, you know, when I recruit for new associates for my firm, is that, you know, I can't just say, well, those are the only candidates that, you know, appear to me. I have to make a conscious effort to say, well, why aren't I getting a more diverse group of applicants? Do I need to reach out to specific clubs at specific universities or specific universities to have a much more robust pool to pull from? Still going to pull the people that are the most competent, but why is there a reason that I tend to see, you know, one particular kind of demographic of people that apply? And so really reach out and broaden that. And then I would say on top of that is, once I recruit them, what do I need to do to keep them to stay? You know, I look back on some organizations where it was a very diverse group that came in. I did public accounting when I first came out of college, and I look back and I was like, oh, that was a really diverse group in terms of women and minorities and everything like that. But then I looked at the top and I'm like, well, God, it's just a bunch of, you know, white men, no offense, Linker, but, you know, there's that, it's two obstacles. You got to get them in the door, and then you have to figure out how do you get those people to stay, because that adds value.
Yeah.
You know, recruiting people and having turnover is challenging. You don't want to lose those good people that could be leaders. So we need, as leaders, need to figure out what are the barriers for that, and how can we overcome that and guide those people so they can be successful.
Yeah, excellent. You don't have to say no offense to Linker. Linker's been a little bit like, you know, racially reconciled. Like he gets it. He's good. He's learned a lot about himself through this process. And I bust Linker's chops a lot, guys. So I apologize, but he's such a good guy, and and he can take it. One of the things that kind of resonated with me, Jeanette, when you were talking about it, talking about from the recruitment standpoint, was this idea of cultural, you know, the buzzword is cultural fit, right? You know, that's what we typically say. It's like, oh my gosh, well, I'm not sure if they fit the culture. And one of the things I think we discussed a little bit was around how do you change the culture within an organization to make them be a fit within that organization, right? Now, what else are you guys doing, just from I know you said from a recruitment standpoint, but how are you helping them, like from a culture standpoint? Because I know you have a diversity board within your organization, a diversity group within your organization. How are you helping them with kind of like just some of the thought process, or have they taken different steps to kind of like go after things differently?
Well, within HFMA, I know we want to reinvigorate, as Linker talked about. We had those two really young, energetic folks, and unfortunately, they left the state. But we want to really reinvigorate that of really how do we be very proactive in terms of engaging folks and really making people feel comfortable. You know, we are doing it right now with in-person meetings, but when you have in-person meetings, is making that effort when you're at that in-person meeting to introduce yourself and talk to somebody that's new, that may not know other folks. And you know, I think as board members within our professional organization, that's our obligation. And what we've done at some of the meetings, we've even put like stickers on so they know, hey, I'm a board member, come talk to me. But sometimes that's hard for someone to come up. You know, I don't know why anyone would think Linker and I are like intimidating, but you know, oh, I don't want to go up and talk to them. So we need to make sure we make that effort and have that dialogue. And then I also know within our organization, we just had recruiting training across the whole firm, and they actually did which I was very impressed with, a conversation on unconscious bias and what that means. And when you're meeting people, and they actually talked about, I thought this was interesting, is when the resumes come in, taking off the name.
The name, yes.
Taking off the name and where they live, so you don't get this bias of, well, they're from here or they live here or what their name is, and really looking at the qualifications. And I thought that was an interesting aspect to look at that. So, yeah, and I know, like for us, we have someone who is Orthodox Jewish. So, on Fridays, she needs to be home by sundown. And anytime we would bring meals in, we're not doing that with COVID, but we would always make sure there was something that she could eat because she keeps kosher. So, are we getting something special for her? And, to not have events on a Friday night because she can't be there, and make sure we have them on Saturday. So just little things. And, and I think also it's just interesting to ask, we shouldn't be afraid to ask questions about someone else's culture. I have someone who's originally from China that works for me, and I find it interesting talking to her when she goes back for now she's not going back, but Chinese New Year of, well, what do you do? And trying to understand some of those traditions and things like that. And, we should be open and able to have those dialogues and not be so afraid of having that conversation. You might actually learn something and some different traditions instead of feeling like you can't.
Excellent. No, I agree. You're talking about two major steps in what we spoke about, which is finding common ground and then celebrating your employees, which was awesome. So I'm look at you, like that's awesome, man. You're rocking it out. Well, Linker, you played a big role, I think. Well, both of you did in the workshop, and I think one of the biggest pieces that impacted me was when you read the quote by Nelson Mandela, and then you added another quote in there, but I think the commentary that you added also just kind of like impacted everybody who was listening, and even myself, because I didn't know what you were going to say, and I just thought it was just extremely, seriously, I was just like, I know he's going to read it, but what you said was just outstanding. You probably can't recreate that passion, because I don't know if you're that good of an actor, but could you for all of us, maybe read that quote, and then just kind of, if you had something else that you wanted to add to it, please just and go ahead and take your time.
No, absolutely, Steve. Yeah, it was my honor to do it. And really, when we talked about that, doing the quote, as with everything, I'm a bit of a nerd. In fact, I just am a nerd. I want to go back and look and do a history and find out more about something. And so I did a lot of research on Nelson Mandela, very, very interesting person who led an absolutely extraordinary life. And just to start off with a quote you had me read, and I want everybody, kind of the listeners, to kind of let this one sink in a little bit. So his quote was, "No one is born hating another person because of the color of his skin, or his background, or his religion. People must learn to hate, and if they can learn to hate, they can be taught to love. For love comes more naturally to the human heart than its opposite." Now, what really sunk into me after, reading this history and his life, I mean, here's a guy who was sentenced to prison. He was in 3 different prisons from 1964 to 1990. And these were not like the Club Med, where we see kind of the, political prisoners of, today, or the U.S. sending. This guy was in for first 18 years in a place called Robben Island, which was basically a lime quarry, where he was working at hard labor. He was in a damp concrete cell it was basically 8 feet by 7 feet. He slept on a straw mat. And initially, when he first started out there, he's permitted 1 visit and 1 letter every 6 months. That was it. So would you or I be just slightly bitter about that?
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit bitter. So here's a man who went through all that. He became president of South Africa for 5 years. He turned down. He said, nope, just doing it once, 5 years, from 94 to 99. And when he came into power, a lot of people were trembling. Okay, here's a guy we locked up for all those years. Here he comes, we're in trouble. And he actually gave a lot of people amnesty, and not everybody was really happy about that. It's like, okay, time for revenge. Let's go get him. Let's go get him. But one of his other quotes, he said, and this is the one I shared, were, "Courageous people do not fear forgiving for the sake of peace." I mean, you think about it, if this guy could do it, if this guy could find in his heart not to hate those people that, I mean, oppression is
Mm-hmm.
almost, too low a word to use
Mm-hmm.
for what happened to him. He forgave them, he worked with them, and he created a peaceful South Africa.
Mm.
And it was hard work, and a
Right.
lot of people didn't like it, but he brought people together of all different races, of all different nationalities. So that really, resonated with me. How this guy could forgive people and find love in his heart after all that he went through.
Uh, I that part just it touched me because I think everyone was maybe I don't think within the workshop there was just like I told them we're going to talk about some heavy stuff, and I think that quote and what you said at that time, I think it just hit home to everybody around just the disparity of different things that take place, whether it's race relations and things like that, but then also the ability for people to forgive and be able to embrace um, changes and differences within others. But more importantly, how do we just take that time and listen? Right. I know Jeanette talked a little bit about that too. Just how do we just take that time and listen and to understand and sometimes ask some of the hard questions and the questions that we don't want to ask because we may seem ignorant, if you will, or we may seem like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I want to ask that question. You know what? I think it's okay. I think we have to just start developing thicker skin, if you will, and for people to be able to ask a question that they may not know the answer to, and they just truly want to know as well. I did an interview with the gentleman, and we were talking a little bit about um, like recruiting and employment and things like that. And he said, well, isn't it like almost like a form of reverse racism if you give the job to somebody who is Black or minority, and the other person is qualified as white? I said, well, first of all, that doesn't happen all the time. And I told him, I said, that's not like a truism, right? It just it just doesn't happen all the time. I said, but then the other assumption that question makes is that it, and to Jeanette's point, is that everybody starts off at the same place. And I told him, I said, I could beat Usain Bolt in a 100-meter race. I could beat him in a 100-meter race. He said, I'd like to see that. I said, I could beat him all day long. I said, if I start at the 80-meter mark and he starts at the starting line, I could beat him all day long. And so when you start to think about recruitment and you start to think about things that disparity, it's just a matter of, yes, to Jeanette's point, people are working harder, but you still have that gap that we still need to close and that we still need to kind of move forward on as well. So thank you both. Two last questions, and we talked about this when we were talked about like programs, right? I don't like the word program, right? And talked about like diversity and inclusion programs. And I asked you both this question because I deal with a lot of people who are within the diversity and inclusion space, and they are coming up against, some roadblocks. And I've been just trying. I won't tell them I've been trying to help them with, because I think what you were going to talk about kind of speaks to that a little bit. But if you can give a piece of advice to someone who's thinking about doing a diversity and inclusion like initiative. I like the word initiative, right? Because I think it should encompass the ethos and the culture of the organization. But if you had to give a piece of advice or pieces of advice to someone who may be struggling with that, what would that be?
I can start. I mean, and this is what when I work with my clients, I always think I need to add value. How is the work I'm doing adding value to them? So I think they need to think about that in terms of how is what I'm going to do make this organization stronger, better? And it can come from more diversity of ideas. I always like it when I recruit people. I've got people that are, all different types of degrees, because they all bring a different view to our work. As well as, when you recruit, you want to get the best and the brightest. And if you're looking, when you're going out there and you narrowed it down and you're missing a whole demographic of people, how are you getting the best and brightest if if your candidate pool only looks like one, they all look the same and they all act the same. You clearly aren't getting the best and brightest, because there's a whole world out there. So take that time to do that. as well as I think when you, and then as well as I talked about trying to keep people, it's a lot of work to recruit and retrain and have somebody, so you want to retain them. That adds value. And I know when I interview people as, a partner within my firm, and I have young women come in, and I've had multiple of them say, it's so nice to be able to see that there's a woman at the top.
Yeah.
So, the interview isn't just, they're going to have other job offers. They want to look around and realize, I'm going to an organization that promotes diversity and inclusion. And whether you look like them or not, that's something that the people are going to notice. And if you want to recruit the best and brightest, have the multitude of ideas and retain people, it needs to start with your culture and the diversity and inclusion of how to make that happen, from the unconscious bias to how do you reach out to interact with those people, and how do you interact when they come join your organization is just going to make your place stronger. I mean, I know, Steve, I had you just because we were finance people and we love our charts and our numbers, and you put some things up there about, to kind of quantify it. I think you can talk about it anecdotally, but I think you can also quantify it. And that, to me, showing that value to the organization, it's an investment in the organization that's going to have a positive return for everybody in turn, from a culture and probably even interacting with, depending on what you're doing, if you're interacting with clients, they don't want to see, they want to see diversity too.
I agree. I think that's an old axiom, right? Is that, oh my gosh, well, the client just wants to see people that look like themselves, and not in today's society, not in today's world. I think they want to know that you're embracing, diversity of thought, but also diversity of talent and diversity of, from an ethnicity standpoint as well. Linker?
No, yeah, I have. Jeanette said it very well. Just a very few things to add there. I think it's kind of that thought process that, diverse people are just going to suddenly show up at your door. No, you've got to go out and do the work. You've got to find them. I know Jeanette brought up that, our chapter is over 50 years old now. I remember at the 50th anniversary dinner, we had one of our original presidents down there. One of his remarks was, when I was chapter president, the only women in here wore habits. It's true. Because they were all nuns. Yeah. Because for the Catholic healthcare systems around here, they were many times the chief accounting executive or chief financial officer. So it's a millstone. We're slowly moving, and I do mean slowly, but there is progress. As Jeanette mentioned, she's the seventh female president. And another thing, I think it's critical, whether it be, association like the Maryland chapter of HFMA or a business, it's top down. So in this case, it's the president and the president-elect kind of leading the way and showing it like, this is the way we're going, folks. And if it has the support of the top leadership, then I think it's more accepted.
Excellent. Well, my last question is, personally, what was one takeaway? What's one or two things that you feel like you have been doing differently as a result of kind of our time together, things that you've learned about yourself, things that you've learned about the organization? What's one or two things that you guys are doing personally? I will get into the organizational side of it, right? Because I think we've already talked about that a little bit, but I just want to know what you guys are doing kind of individually.
I can go first this time. I will just say a lot more listening, a lot more very, very consciously trying to see both sides of the story. I actually do have a degree in journalism before I entered this field, so that's something I've tried to pride myself on, to know that, there was an old saying of one of my college professors that I always liked, only don't believe anything you hear and only half of what you see. And the old axiom, there's three sides to every story, yours, mine, and the cold hard truth.
Yeah.
I think we all need to be careful to jump to reactions, and sometimes, certain situations we have to be careful, and we have to see it from that other person's point of view. And I think that's very important. And sometimes that's harder. I mean, Jeanette brought that up. If you're brought up in a certain background, and yes, okay, I went to college and this, that, and I had some opportunities that other people had, did not have, excuse me. You may not truly be able to appreciate that, but maybe if you kind of step back and think about it a little bit, I think it'll, get you closer to where you need to be as far as your thought process.
Excellent. Excellent.
Yeah, I think for me, and I said we all need to get a little more comfortable with being uncomfortable. We have to be okay to, I don't even know if even 5 years ago we would be having a discussion like this. So I think what this has brought forth is to say, I'm a leader, as we did this is, I kind of look back and going, why didn't we do this before? And, and I had conversations with my daughter about it. Hey, I'm doing this type of program, and to have that discussions. And as Linker said, really don't jump to conclusions, but really look at both sides of the story. Even watch different news programs that bring different views, and take that moment and educate yourself with the facts. There's a lot of there's a lot of hype out there, but taking the moment to, especially with the internet, it's not that hard to research stuff. Research, get the facts, make your own decisions, realize that everyone's going to be kind of coming from different views, and be open to that conversation, and that you may not be right, and what you thought before may not be okay. But, if we're willing to open up and communicate and have that conversation and ask a question, as you said, understand another culture, I think on both sides, we're going to be a lot better. And to me, and a little bit, I also feel a little more hopeful. I feel like this is a turning point. Something feels different about this, this time. And I think the next generation coming up, I think views the world a little bit different. But then again, I'm viewing that from Maryland. It may not be like that in other parts of the world, but I'd like to think that there's a little bit of hope out there, that maybe we're at a turning point, and that I can be part of that turning point.
Excellent.
Steve, could I add on to Jeanette's comment?
Yes.
I think it's excellent. I think part of being a leader, whatever you're, whether it be an association, in your business, whatever, it is having those uncomfortable conversations, and you can have them respectfully.
Correct.
What's your view on that? And just, I think the appreciation of the persons you're talking to, this person's listening to me. He or she wants to understand what I'm going through, how I view this, how my world is. And I think that it does give me a little bit more hope. I see things that I wouldn't see growing up in the 1970s. Now it's better, but like I alluded to, it's a millstone. It seems like we're slowly moving, and I wish it would be faster. I think we're making that progress. I just wish we could, get there, without the millstone.
Well, thank you both. You are a testament to exactly why I started this series around having executives and CEOs talk about their experiences personally, but also within their organizations, but taking action, but making sure that you are doing things within the community, but that you're also bringing it back to your own organization. I truly appreciate your candor, everything that you said about your personal experiences, because I think that's what resonates with people. All of our listeners, we are a community of listeners. We are learning together, we're growing together, and we're taking action together. I just want to thank you personally for being on the Worthy Podcast and sharing your experiences and sharing it with our community as well. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
All right. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you, Steve.
Well, hey, all right. Well, okay, that's okay. We can edit all everything else out afterwards.
Yeah.
Awesome job. Great job, both of you. Great job. I mean, dude, that was awesome. I don't know how you guys felt. I felt that I was stoked by your stories, by the authenticity of, because it's just who you are, about how you've seen things and where you guys are now. But you guys just got into a flow. You guys got into a rhythm. Did you guys feel that?
Yeah.
It was good.
No, you're a good leader of conversation, Steve. You really are.
Yeah.
It's a gift.
Well, thank you. But no, I'm serious. Like I'm ecstatic. I'm excited about this. So what we'll do, I typically do the audio first, right? So we do the audio first, and I release that because that's going to be from a podcast standpoint, and then probably later we do the actual video side of it as well. So just to let you guys know that it'll probably be not next week, but it'll probably be the week after that. So I'm gonna probably So and before it goes out, I will send it to you guys so you guys can take a listen as well. So that you guys will be like, hey, I don't know about that part, or that part sucked, or
take
whatever.
out the part where I said no offense, Linker.
Yeah, exactly.
All good.
Exactly. No, we're keeping
that makes
that
it
part
sounds
in.
more conversational. Actually, it doesn't sound scripted.
Yeah. I'm keeping
as far as I'm concerned.
I'm keeping in all my jabs at Linker, every single one of them. I actually may add a couple to the
all good
to it as well. But yeah, so before it goes anywhere, once it gets mastered and it gets edited or whatever, you guys will have a copy of it, so that way you guys can take a look at listen to it before it goes out to the world.
Okay.
To the world.
Sounds like a plan, Steve. Thank you for your time. Hey, quick note to Jeanette. Jeanette, you can call me at Harbor in the morning. I'll be there.
Okay. Is that tomorrow? Yeah,
you wanted you and I to get together tomorrow just to chat for a little bit, since I can't be there next Thursday. Yeah. So thank you for letting me get that little sidebar in there, Steve. So.
Hey, no,
Linker keeps me on track.
Jeanette, he's going to be at Harbor tomorrow if you didn't get that.
Yeah. So there.
Get that.
It's on my calendar. I hadn't looked that far ahead. I got to go through today.
She's got my cell number, and it's just easier to yak away on my conference line down there. So if I'm there.
Look, what's all of these awards and stuff back there I'm looking at, man? But over your right shoulder, is that like your Eagle Wall, or what's that, man?
That is my certification.
That's
all my stuff from HFMA.
That's awesome. That is awesome. I like that. Jeanette doesn't have any of that stuff, so.
Oh, she's got quite a lot of it.
I've got some.
I can't see it because she has this, like, I don't know. Is that what?
She got the Peabody, I think, right?
The background's the library from where I went to college.
Oh,
really?
Okay.
Yeah, like
nice.
the original library. It was like ranked in one of the top prettiest libraries in the country. So
that's gorgeous. I was gonna say like it was gonna like New York or Paris or something.
I was thinking the Peabody.
At Lehigh, it's like the original library. Of course, we laughed because you never went to this. This is the library you went to socialize. You went to the new library if you really wanted to study. So. But I needed a better background, and this popped up, and I'm like, I like that.
That is a great background. That is a background. That's awesome. Well, thank you guys again. Thank you for everything, from the beginning until this part as well has been outstanding. I will make sure you guys get a copy of that as soon as it's done, so you guys can take a listen to it. Thank you so much. Have a great morning. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Do the same. Talk to you. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.
Thanks, Steve.